Russian will face a huge dilemma, and possibly this dilemma will cost Putin his power, because Crimea is not just a piece of land, but it's overestimated in terms of spiritual, historical connection to Russia. So I believe we can get it back even without trying to reconquer it by our soldiers.
Now, at least 9 people have been killed and 63 injured in Russian strikes on Kyiv overnight. The Foreign Office Minister, Stephen Doughty, has been speaking about the attack in the Commons in the last hour.
These are simply shocking scenes, and of course they come on the back of shocking scenes not only in Kiev but in Kryvyi Rih, in Sumy, in Marhanets, and many other locations across Ukraine in recent days. And I would remind the House, Mr. Speaker, while Ukraine has been in peace talks, Russia has continued these severe attacks, including last night, and that is a stark reminder of the continued bloodshed and aggression perpetrated by Putin.
Well, shortly before the Russian attack, Donald Trump criticised Volodymyr Zelensky's approach to peace talks, writing on social media that the Ukrainian president was making inflammatory comments by refusing to accept Russian sovereignty over Crimea. Here's President Trump speaking in the Oval Office of the White House overnight.
I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky, and I hope that Zelensky, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky so far. It's been harder, but that's okay. It's all right. But I think we have a deal with both. I hope they do it, because I'm looking to save, and you know, we spend a lot of money, but this is about a lot of humanity. This is the worst. I get the pictures, the satellite pictures. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, I'm joined now from Kyiv by Alexander Khara, former advisor to the Foreign and Defence Ministries of Ukraine. Alexander, good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
Thank you very much for being with us. Can you tell us what happened in Ukraine overnight and what the scene is like in Kyiv this morning?
Well, it was a loud night. The Russians attacked us with more than 100 drones and missiles. It's a way how they show their willingness to agree on peace terms with Ukraine. But seriously, it's just a continuation of this horror that the Russians are trying to unleash on Ukrainian civilians with the break our will to resist. And secondly, is a way how the Russians negotiate. They don't want to have any ceasefires before they can reach political gains from the other parties. So they are doing their regular things that they've been doing in Ukraine since 2014, in Syria since 2015, in Chechnya in 90s, and in the beginning of 2000s. So it's a Russian modus operandi.
Donald Trump's suggestion that Volodymyr Zelensky is the main obstacle to peace. How would you respond to that?
Well, we live in the times of post-truth, and certainly if we consider that Trump says some or let's say variant of truth, it may be we can agree on something. But this was started not in 2022 when Zelensky was the president of Ukraine, but back in 2014 when the Russians illegally annexed Crimea and launched a proxy war on Donbass. So there is no connection between Zelensky and the war 11 years ago, because Zelensky at that time was a successful comedian, not a president. So that's why I believe what Trump is saying, he is trying to exert pressure over Zelensky and Ukraine in general, and he actually just spread the Russian narrative, the Russian propaganda. And Zelensky was critical about Trump and his circles. They consume Russian propaganda without any critical thinking about it.
Yeah, look, I'd suspect that while quite a lot of people think that Donald Trump's repeated attacks on Volodymyr Zelensky are pretty abhorrent, it is fair to think that perhaps it's not plausible that Ukraine can in fact get Crimea back, and perhaps he's just accepting the inevitable. Do you think it's reasonable to expect that Ukraine can eventually, if things continue, get Crimea back?
Well, yes, sure. In 1940, the Soviet Union illegally annexed the Baltic states. And those states, and this annexation has not been recognized by the United States. There was a Welles Declaration of 1940, and actually during the term of office of Mr. Trump back in 2018, Mr. Pompeo, Secretary of State Pompeo, declared that the United States are not going to recognize the illegal annexation of Crimea. So we are not talking about the time frame when we can get back Crimea, but actually I believe that Crimea is the center of gravity of this war. If we will be able to cut the supplies of weapons and manpower to Crimea from the Russian mainland, I am talking about the Kerch Bridge and the so-called land bridge that the Russians have, this railway across the illegally annexed territories of Donetsk and Kherson region. So the Russian will face a huge dilemma, and possibly this dilemma will cost Putin his power, because Crimea is not just a piece of land, but it's overestimated in terms of spiritual, historical connection to Russia. So I believe we can get it back even without trying to reconquer it by our soldiers. I mean, just isolating it. And there are many reasons for Ukraine and Europeans and the whole world not to allow American partners to legally recognize the annexation of Crimea. Back in 1994, we gave up on the third largest nuclear arsenal and got that so-called Budapest Memorandum that assured us from the assurances of the United States, Great Britain, France, and Russia that they would not violate territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. So the many countries across the globe would think that nuclear arms is the only way how to deter rough states of annexing their territories. And the bad guys across the globe would say that if we have nuclear arms, it means that we can grab the other territory with impunity.
Sure.
Not to mention the importance of Crimea for the Russian power projection beyond the Black Sea into the Mediterranean, Northern Africa, and most importantly, the Middle East. Without Crimea, Russia could not be able to interfere in the Syrian civil war.
Look, finally, Alexander, I mean, if not Crimea, are there territorial concessions you think that Ukraine would be prepared to make in exchange for a peace deal, or is that what this whole war is about?
Well, we're willing to give Russians the Kursk region of Russia back, so we're not an aggressive state. We're not going to annex it and pretend that there was some kind of referendum with Ukrainian speakers are living there. And actually, those territories, Belgorod and Kursk region, are ethnically Ukrainian territories. At least they used to be. But we are not the savages like Russians. We don't even. 80% of Ukrainians are against any legal recognition of the illegally annexed territories by Russia, even if there is a peace proposal from Russia. Only 5% of Ukrainians would support such an idea. Secondly, it's just legally impossible to do. Neither president nor parliament can accept such a new state of affairs. It's up to the Ukrainian public and the whole Ukrainian referendum to decide that. And as I said, that majority of Ukrainians are against any territorial concession, because Ukrainians understand that any territorial concession would not bring a just and lasting peace with Russia. Russia will return again to demolish our state and to subjugate our nation. So that's why it's not a space for compromise. That's why I'm saying, it is my last point, while the politicians in the West and journalists are saying there is no military solution to this conflict, I am saying vice versa. There is the only way to solve this conflict. It's by military means, by defeating Russia, by denying Russia resources for their war machine.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexander Khara. Alexander Khara, former advisor to the Foreign and Defence Ministries of Ukraine.